Welcome to the Transforming Trauma podcast. Transforming Trauma is presented by the NARM Training Institute. I'm your host, Sarah Bueno, and I'm delighted to have you join us today. Hey, Transforming Trauma listeners. If you're a licensed mental health professional working with complex trauma and you're interested in learning the neuroaffective relational model, we're excited to share with you that there are 2 upcoming NARM therapist trainings starting in January 2022. One of these trainings will be offered in an online format, and the other will be offered in person in San Francisco, California. This Level 2 NARM therapist training is designed to support mental health professionals who work with clients or populations dealing with complex trauma. Being trained in NARM, one of the first clinical models specifically designed to address ACEs and CPTSD, supports therapists to learn how to address the long-term impacts of adverse childhood experiences and complex post-traumatic stress disorder. The NARM therapist training will be taught by NARM senior faculty Brad Kammer and a team of experienced NARM training assistants. You will learn a comprehensive developmental framework and clinical approach. As you're learning and integrating NARM, you will receive individualized support from this team of skilled, passionate, and supportive trainers. If you're interested in this training, we encourage you to register now to reserve your spot. For more information and to register, please visit www.narmtraining.com/schedule. We look forward to you joining our growing international NARM community and are inspired to work with you to bring NARM to your clients and communities in order to transform trauma. Today's guest is Althea Simpson. Althea is the founder of Brighter Day Therapeutic Solutions and Unicorn Life Training. She's a licensed clinical social worker specialized in trauma recovery, registered play therapist and supervisor, and certified Lego serious play facilitator. Her approach to treatment is tailored to the unique needs of her clients, and she brings a range of educational, professional, and life experiences to her work as a therapist, clinical supervisor, and mental health consultant. Please enjoy my conversation with Althea Simpson. Hello, Althea. Welcome to Transforming Trauma.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this conversation. As we've just been kind of preparing, we've been laughing our butts off already. So who knows what's going to come out today?
Yes, those are the best episodes.
Yes, right? Well, let's start the way that we start every episode of Transforming Trauma and ask, what is it that you hope listeners will get out of our episode today?
I hope listeners would get out of this episode that play therapy is not just for children. It could be used across the lifespan with different populations with the appropriate adaptations. And play therapy is really trauma-informed treatment.
Wow, I literally know zero about play therapy, so this is going to be really fascinating. Well, tell us more about you and how you got here.
So I am a licensed clinical social worker and a registered play therapist supervisor. You know, it's so many ways to tell this story, but I got here by accident. I had no intention on becoming a therapist, not alone a trauma therapist. When I left the business world to go into social work, and I went to social work school, it was for macro social work, community organizing, organizational leadership, grassroots work, and advocacy. And so I ended up, play therapy was by accident too, but I ended up in psychotherapy because my supervisor, my first year internship supervisor, told me to get my clinical hours and go back to macro social work because it would make me more marketable. I would be able to do more things. And I trusted her, so I did it. And I never went back to macro social work. So yeah, I had to go back to school to take a couple of classes and do some extra hours of supervision because I went through a macro program, but I went back to school. I did that and I'm here. And I just kind of fell into trauma because I worked at a community mental health organization in DC, and you took the cases that came in the door. So I started educating myself and taking trainings to make sure that I wasn't screwing up anybody's kids because I worked on the children and adolescents team. And that's how I got here.
Wonderful. Well, tell us about the work that you've been doing recently. I know you're also getting your PhD, so there's that as well.
Yes. So the work that I've been doing lately is shifting play therapy to informing people about how to use it with adults. because it is so effective. I use a lot of the activities that I use in my work. I don't think that we should have clients go where we're not willing to go. And so I do the activities for myself and, stuff comes up and I'm like, wait a minute, where'd that come from? Or I didn't know that I was feeling that way. And of course, I'm a trauma therapist and I can't effectively do my job without having my own therapist. But I also
Yes.
have a professional supervisor and I do consultation depending on the area that I need consultation in. So I do these activities and I started shifting to awareness of the effectiveness of play therapy with adults. And then plus the Black Play Therapy Society, I started the Black Play Therapy Society and the Black Play Therapy Conference in 2019 because, the disparities, even for the Black play therapists, in the play therapy community, not being able to get on the stage to, showcase that they know what they're doing, but also the inconsistencies in information that was being taught about Black communities. I was like, okay, well, we need some cultural competence here. Throw in some
Minimally.
humility. Yeah,
Mhm.
throw in some humility. So I've been doing a lot of work around that and healing the Black child and family because
Mm.
Black communities have undeniably unique needs around mental health and trauma.
So we keep throwing around the term play therapy, and I want to make sure it seems self-explanatory, but there might be more to it. So could you explain for listeners who don't know what it is? What is play therapy?
So play therapy is a real psychotherapy treatment modality. I call it sheer magic, but the Association for Play Therapy has its own definition. So I'll just summarize that. Play therapy is really a psychotherapy treatment modality that helps individuals be able to express what they're not able to say verbally. So it helps them communicate their needs, psychological distress, their wants, and their desires using expressive mediums.
And what about play therapy is so, I guess, lends itself to working with folks experiencing trauma?
Well, first I'll go to the research. The research says that if you are not using expressive therapies like sand tray, play therapy, music therapy, art-based therapy, you're not doing trauma-informed care. So it doesn't matter what trauma treatment modality you're using, NARM, for instance, incorporating some type of expressive therapies. Expressive therapies like play therapy helps individuals move a little bit quicker through their therapeutic process so real change can happen a lot sooner for them because a lot of people get stuck in their head and talking. So play therapy helps make that connection between the right brain and the left brain. So you have the creative side of your brain talking for the cognitive side of your brain.
Thank you. And tell us a little bit about what that looks like. So if you're adapting this, it was originally intended for children, but you're adapting it to working with adults. Like, what does that look like?
Well, what it looks like, you can incorporate sand tray. And so I can give a directive. So there are 3 modes of play therapy. You have child-centered play therapy, which believes that children have everything within them to resolve their own problems. And
So NARMy.
and I've seen that happen. I am not a child-centered play therapist because I believe in actively engaging and being inquisitive and asking questions. Right. And so with child-centered play therapy, you're pretty much tracking what the child is doing, what the child is saying, observing their playthings. In non-directive play therapy, the therapists have a little bit more involvement. And so in child-centered play therapy, a child could say, what is this? What do you think it is? Or what are we doing today? What do you want to do today? We return the responsibility back to the child. In non-directive play therapy, I can say, hey, let's do a sand tray today. And the child may say, no, I prefer to play with Legos. And so the child plays with Legos. So I can suggest something, but it's still the child session or the adult session, and we go off of them. And then in directive play therapy, the therapist has more involvement and probably guiding the session more, but it's still collaborative. And so I practice from a non-directive and a directive approach with children and adults and families. Let's say I'm doing Legos and I can say, build your nightmare problem. And so they would build their problem using the Legos. The client puts meaning to whatever the build is. So it doesn't matter what it looks like. You're using a lot of storytelling and metaphors because even, we know things that are familiar. And even if it's a metaphor, right, it's still something familiar about that story to the client. And so then they would construct their model, they would tell their story, they would reflect, and I would ask questions and inquire about what they built.
Well, and it's funny not knowing anything about play therapy, but of course, seeing it in the movies. I think what often happens in the movies is, the kid will be playing and then the therapist will interpret, right? Which is the opposite of what we do in NARM. And I hear you too saying that that's really actually play therapy is not the therapist interpreting, but the client for themselves.
Play therapy is so broad. And so you don't, in some parts of play therapy, you don't give meaning. Overall, we do not give meaning to what the client is doing. If the color is pink and they say that the color is gray, then it's gray. I can clearly see it's pink, but it's gray. So we really don't do a lot of interpreting of what a client does or what they say. It is really about the client. Now, but we also have to maintain our therapeutic knowledge and responsibilities as a therapist and inquiring and being inquisitive, but the client gives meaning to what they're doing. It's not for us to give meaning. We can have our own thoughts about it, but we don't put that on the client.
Right. Yeah. And so you're working with families and with adults?
Yes, I work with children, adolescents, families, adults, and couples. I do play therapy with couples as well.
Oh, what does that look like?
Same process. I typically give a directive based off of our interaction, something that they said may have struck something in for me. And I'm like, okay, I'll give you a directive. And if it's a sand tray, do a split sand tray. What your marriage was like or your relationship was like before the problems. And then the other side, what is the primary problem that you see? And then we process that. And it's the same. It's all in a directive that you give.
But also, I mean, you're saying the word directive, but it still feels very like intuitive and free flowing. And the client has so much agency. So you're not telling them what to do. You're just giving them a starting point, right?
Yes. And so the directive refers to posing the question or looking at a problem. So that's what giving them a directive means, posing a question or inquiring about a problem that they want to explore.
And I'm curious too, you mentioned just a little bit about working with Black families, and I'm curious, what's important about that work for you and being able to support Black families in healing through play therapy?
Well, one, it's deconstructing the stigma around mental health in Black families. And not all Black families, but the majority of Black communities, it's you go to church, you pray, you'll find an answer. If your problems are not being resolved, then you're not praying hard enough, or your belief system is faulty, and that is so inaccurate. And so when I talk to parents and adults about, Jesus was a counselor. Like, let's go Bible-based if you want to go Bible-based. I'm not all the way heathen. I know a little bit something about the Bible, right?
All the way heathen. Have Christian roots, right?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. That's amazing.
And so I talk about that. If you go Bible-based, God doesn't want us to suffer. And if we have people who are educated, just like with doctors, we are educated to provide this service, and it's beneficial. You can have an intersectionality of spirituality, religion, and mental health, because you can talk to God all day long, but sometimes you need someone to answer, and in the moment. And that's what a therapist can do and help with guidance. And so just understanding that overall Black communities are relational people. So building that relationship is so important. Therapists expect people in general, but especially Black people, to come in and start talking about their trauma and things in their life, because it's like, it's fascinating. It's no secret that we have undeniably unique needs around, racial trauma, poverty, and all those. And sometimes that curiosity can take hold of a therapist and
Right.
they want to jump right in to find out how someone grew up, putting their own assumptions on how someone grew up and without getting to know that client. And so it's important. The relationship aspect is important. Respecting, we have to confront, we have to challenge, but I think that we have to create relationships to be able to do that, instead of jumping right into it. And even for myself, I mean, I am very public about being a therapist with a therapist. And I remember going to a white therapist and he automatically assumed that I grew up in poverty, not having, and I was like, wait a minute, whoa, where is that coming from? Just because I said that I grew up witnessing domestic violence and was psychologically and emotionally abused myself as a child doesn't mean that my childhood was all bad. It had some moments, but I mean, we never had to worry about our lights being cut off. We never had to worry about being evicted or having food. In fact, I wished I could eat peanut butter and jelly and hot dogs while my family eating steak, duck, rabbit, all of that stuff. Like as a kid, like where y'all getting this stuff from?
Right? Mac and cheese.
And seafood was a staple in my family. And we lived in the hood, but nothing about how I lived was hood. And we lived in the hood, I think, because my mom worked for DC Housing Authority. And I don't know what her reasons were for having us live in the hood. But I was still exposed to a lot of the community violence because we lived in that community. And so he made all of these assumptions just based on how I was dressed. It was my day off. I'm a t-shirt and sneakers type of girl, right? And so that's how I went into the office and he made all of these assumptions. And after I corrected him, I left and never went back.
And that exact story, I've heard that from other Black folks before. So that is not, I think social work in particular has really questionable roots, right? And so some of the things that we are taught in social work school about different communities of color, it really isn't cultural competency. It's really stereotyping.
Yes, it is. And I encourage mental health professionals to go, we have a foundation in which we learn and what we learn academically. But when it comes to Black and Brown communities, you have to look at who wrote the books that you learned from. Like telling therapists that you don't talk to clients about yourself. How do you develop that therapeutic rapport, right? Like I can't tell my clients that I love peanut butter and jelly, but I like to grill it like it's a grilled cheese too, right? So, I mean,
I'm coming to your house for dinner. We're going to have a good time.
We do this in my office too.
Oh my God.
Because I use food as nurturing because my primary population is children and families in the foster care system. And so over 80% of my caseload is children and families involved in the foster care system. And so, but that's a part of our work, and real therapeutic change is not possible if your client doesn't have a connection to you. I'm not saying I have boundaries that I set with my clients, but I don't put those boundaries up front with them. I tell them, you can ask me anything you want to ask about me. And if I think it's crossing the line, I'll let you know. So shoot your shot.
Right.
Like if you want to know something about me, ask. Because they are coming in, especially dealing with trauma, telling us the most indecent, the most humiliating, the most troublesome things about themselves. And I can't tell you what type of food I like. That's a disconnect for me.
Right. Well, and as you said, who wrote the books? White people wrote the books. And the intention was that somehow the therapeutic space was going to be objective. And that's just not the case. There is no objectivity. And that's one of the ways that white supremacy has been upheld in the mental health collective.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just so many different things about the Black community, and is rooted in how we were raised or even the stories that we heard coming down generationally, right? So you may have had grandma and papa and all of them sitting around talking about their experiences. And then you have your parents sitting around talking about the experiences of their parents and grandparents. And as a kid, you hear that. And those are things that we grow up with, so we can't dismiss that. And one of the things I remember being in a play therapy training, and the therapist was saying something about Black people and their hair, and they didn't understand why hair was so important to their client, and they was having all of these problems. Well, let me educate you a little bit, right? I'm not trying to take over your training, but I can no longer sit here and hear you make all of these assumptions and stereotypes about Black people. And typically, I was the only Black person, Black or brown person in these trainings for almost 10 years. Every month, the Virginia Association for Play Therapy, Northern Virginia chapter, did a monthly workshop, a 2-hour monthly workshop, the third Friday of every month. And for almost 10 years, consistently, I was the only Black person in that training. And then every now and then another Black person or a person of color will trickle in. And so I was like, let me just correct you about some things. And that's one of the reasons why I started the Black Play Therapy Society and the conference as well. And all about the hair. Well, as Black girls, we're taught that your hair need to be on point, because they already going to find other things. So your image is very important. But also, as Black girls, we are taught that you don't let everybody in your hair. And so a lot of other races don't understand why we jerk away when you go to reach for our hair. One, you violate.
Don't touch anyone's hair, period. Come on. People do that to me all the time too.
Yes, you violate in my space by trying to touch my hair. But we're taught that not everybody's supposed to be in your hair. Even from a Black community, and hairdressers, you don't jump from chair to chair. And so that's just something that's rooted in us. And that's something that needs to be understood. And she was like, the child was tired in school and talking about she stayed up until 3 a.m. to get her hair braided. Well, that's how long it takes to get your hair braided, ma'am. It takes about 6 hours. And if she going after school, then yeah. So just let her come to the office and take a cat nap and get back to work instead of putting her out of school.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that's just one example of the competence or knowing about Black culture and Black communities. It takes about 6 to 12 hours, depending on the length and how you're getting your hair. It takes that long to get your hair done. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And it sounds to me like you are a pretty outspoken person. And I'm just curious, what gives you the courage to be like, no, y'all are doing it wrong. Let me tell you how it is.
I think getting tired of hearing the misrepresentation of my community. So sitting there and just looking around the room. And then one time I was just like, you know what? No, I can't take this anymore. But at first I would just hold it in because I was like, I don't want to take over their training. I don't want to keep interrupting them. But then I was like, because the research shows, the statistics shows there are more of other races treating Black children and families than Black therapists.
Right.
And so I was like, no, they are treating our communities. Imagine the damage that's being done because of their lack of knowledge or the misinformation. And then they have this misinformation, and then they are presenting this misinformation to 50 other therapists in the room.
Right.
And that's what made me become outspoken. That it was after that hair incident where they was like, they should have sent the child, they was sending the child home. Why would you send her home? Because she's trying to take a nap. Let her take a nap through lunch and then let her go back to class refreshed. And say, because she's not getting any of the academic learning. Right. And those are systemic issues too. She's not getting any learning because she was taking a nap. The teacher, instead of inquiring about what was going on with the child, you automatically send her to the office. She gets upset and then has to go to the school counselor, and then you all send her home. Well, guess what?
Right.
Now she's missing a whole day of learning
Right.
instead of an hour.
And that's educational abuse.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, may I make a reflection?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you said like, oh, I'm tired and that's why I speak up. But I'm going to venture a guess that a lot of Black and brown therapists are tired and they don't speak up. So there's something within you that has that spark to really, say what's true. And I just want to honor that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and it get me in. I'm not even going to lie. It get me in a lot of trouble with the play therapy community.
You're a troublemaker.
Yes, the black, the white, it doesn't matter. I get, because I'm very outspoken and I'm like, I'm just being my authentic self. So I had no voice for so long. And I'm very vocal about being psychologically and emotionally abused as a child and watching domestic violence, right? I became selectively mute, and that landed me in special education.
Wow. Right? And now look at you. And my gosh.
Yes. And so now, and once I found my voice, and then even switching over from the business field to the psychotherapy field or the field of social work saved my life. Because again, my family didn't believe in therapy. I didn't know anything about therapy. And then when I had to go to therapy because I had reached my breaking point, going through some grief, then I ended up going to therapy. And that's when I learned about trauma. I learned about trauma and I was like, wow, this makes sense to me. Right? This makes sense to how I lived my life, how I, closed myself off from people, not trusting people, and a whole lot of other stuff that, transpired through my journey. But then I got to a place where I was like, no, I did my self-work. And I got to a place where I achieved peace. And a part of my peace is speaking out and speaking up. And not holding that in and taking that in, causing more anxiety or hurt and pain, discomfort. No, I'm going to say it and I'm going to let you know. Yeah, no, let's hit there. And then we can hit the reset button, depending on how you take this information or how you receive it and what you do with it. But I'm also very vocal about the Black community as well, because just because you Black don't make you culturally competent. Just because you're Black doesn't mean that you had the same experiences of someone else. Like for me, when I first started in this field, I got cursed out several times by parents because I didn't understand why they didn't want to spend time with their child. But then I had to take a step back and I was like, okay, well, Althea, you all never had to worry about where your next meal was going to come from. My family, although we had the domestic violence in our family, my family did a lot of family-oriented stuff. We did game nights. We did movie nights. We ate dinner together every day. We baked and cooked together on the weekend. And so that wasn't a part of my work. So hearing a parent tell me I don't have time to spend time with my child or play a game with my child, that was foreign to me until I got cursed out. Right?
That'll teach you real quick.
Yeah. And so I find that a lot of Black therapists think that just because I'm Black, I'm woke and I can treat this. And no, you can get a Black therapist that can jack you up. And I am very vocal about my therapist being white. I tried to go to 2 Black therapists. It didn't work out. They were unprofessional, canceling on me, at the last minute, or wanting to know about how I'm building my practice. That's not what I'm paying you for. I'm paying you out of pocket. And so then I inquired about a therapist that's trained to work with therapists. And that first referral that I got, we clicked. She's culturally competent. So I encourage the Black community to seek therapy, and stuff, but don't just go to someone because they're Black, because they can jack you up.
Well, I think if you haven't done your own work, obviously you're not going to be able to meet somebody. And sometimes I think when we as therapists feel like we're really similar to our client, we're going to project and we're going to assume and not be curious because we're just going to assume we've had the same life experiences.
Yes. Yes. And I think having my trauma background makes me a phenomenal trauma therapist. And it took a long time for me to even acknowledge that I am a dynamic therapist. And I know where that comes from. That comes from being told that I wasn't going to ever be anything. I was nothing. I was stupid. I was dumb. All of these egregious things that were said to me from the time I was in first grade to probably about the beginning of my 10th grade year.
Was that from home or at
From my
school?
stepfather. And then it was teased and bullied in school because I was in special education. And then the community. So it was just all of that. So I know where some of it comes from. But once I did my work and I had to take a step back, like, dispel those irrational thoughts with something that you know to be true. And so I think I make a connection, and I'm such a great trauma therapist because I understand from a personal and a professional standpoint. And I get triggered. Sometimes my client stuff hits me. But that's what I have a therapist for, and that's what I have professional supervision for. And if I cross the line, I apologize, right? I repair that with my clients. Yeah. And being self-aware, that's one of the things. I don't think that I'm above my clients. I am aware of the power dynamic, right? And how they perceive me, but that's not the air of arrogance that I bring into my sessions. The same way we're talking right now, this is how I talk with my clients.
Same. Yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
I don't have time. I don't have time. And they don't either.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, speaking of getting triggered, I'm curious to hear how you've been able to take care of yourself with everything that's been going on in the world, right? Like this is really, I think, the first time in modern history that on a global way, we therapists are experiencing exactly what our clients are too. And to be a Black woman moving through the world with all of the racial violence that's been happening, how are you caring for yourself?
I decreased my client caseload. I scaled back my form of living, right? Because, I had to, couldn't travel anyway. So that was easy for me to scale back, and I had to focus on me. So I was very intentional about taking clients. I know that the need increased, but for me, my caseload decreased because I wasn't going to be providing half-baked services to clients. I would remind clients that I am in this pandemic too, right? I am in the same pandemic that you're in. And so I'm going to extend you grace. You have to extend me grace. But one of the things that I realized was that a part of my self-care as a trauma therapist, I have a great self-care routine. And then 9 months into the pandemic, I realized that my self-care routine shifted as well because I went to go get massages every Wednesday. I don't see clients on Wednesday. I take that midday break to reset myself. And a part of that was a massage and then going out to eat. So that shifted for me. But 9 months into the pandemic, I realized that, okay, I was getting a lot of anxiety. I wasn't sleeping well. And I was like, okay, you haven't done a different self-care plan or routine. And I was just showing up for clients, although I scaled everything back. And so, but self-care is so important. So I reset myself. On Sundays, I just sit back and watch old reruns of old TV shows. I could watch Murder, She Wrote, Matlock, and Columbo.
Give me some Angela Lansbury.
Yes, I can watch that all day, every day, over and over. I don't care how many times I saw the episodes. But and so my self-care practices, I had to redo my self-care practices, create a new self-care practice, and a part of that was decreasing my caseload. So when clients started transitioning out of therapy, I would not bring any new clients in because I had to reset myself.
And that's such a hard thing, I think, for therapists to give ourselves permission to do. Yeah. And I've had to do the same. And it's a shame that, of course, the need is increasing. We just need more therapists.
We just need more therapists. And us being overwhelmed, I'm not seeing 60 clients a week. I refuse. I refuse to see 30 clients a week. But to each his own, people have to do what they feel is best for them. But all money, not good money, especially when it's diminishing your health and your quality of life.
Right. Yeah.
And so I chose my quality of life over money. So I drastically decreased my caseload down to 6 clients. So over the past, I think 6 months, I've only had 6 clients.
Mm,
And so when they started coming off of my caseload, I just wasn't putting anybody back in on my caseload. And I just
mhm,
started reopening my schedule. Right. And so, but for me, it wasn't about the money. It was about my mental faculties and my physical health.
mm, absolutely. Well, good job.
Mhm. Yeah, but don't get me wrong. And so, just in case therapists thinking, how was she able to live off of 6 clients? So, I try to teach therapists that you have to monetize your skills, right? Because you don't want your financial stuff, showing up in sessions with clients. And I hear that from therapists when they're upset that their clients come in with designer bags or drive these luxury cars and everything, but they feel like they're struggling. Well, shift what you're doing, monetize your skills. I started a whole play therapy academy and a training institute. So I was able to
Mm,
decrease to seeing 5 to 6 clients because I was training as well.
mhm.
Right.
Yep.
And so you have to monetize your skills and get out of that mindset that just because I'm in the helping field, I'm not supposed to make money. Yeah, nah. Whoever
Right.
told you that, I don't know, reset that mindset.
Well, I think that's a social work mantra,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And that does have to change.
it does. And then wanting other people to do things for you for free so you can monetize it. Yeah, no,
Hmm.
no. No. So it's a mindset that we have to shift. But that financial mindset, I find when I do supervision, it shows up in sessions with clients. And I put them on pause. No, no, no. Check yourself. You know, it had nothing to do with that client's financial situation.
Hmm.
Look at what you're doing, and you decided to do this job. So your stuff should not be coming in. Check that on the other side of the door. No, that
Hmm.
don't go to the client. You don't put that off on the client.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I'd love to shift the conversation a little bit just to hear more about your work. So, do you have any particular stories of either struggle or transformation that you want to share with us today?
Well, I don't know. I just think that self care is really important in teaching clients about self care. Clients who have been traumatized, they experience trauma, and that's one of the things that I promote or push when I'm doing training or talking to other therapists. Clients are not merely exposed to trauma. I think that diminishes their experiences by saying that they are exposed to trauma. They experienced trauma.
Hmm.
They experience trauma, and that's a part of them. And we have to honor that, one, by properly labeling it and then properly treating it, because your treatment of a client is guided by your knowledge.
Right.
And if you don't have the proper knowledge about a client's trauma experiences, then you're mistreating them. So for me, it's just, I don't know, transformational. I think everything that I do is I look to transform anything that I do, and whether it's small or,
Hmm.
it doesn't matter what scale it's on. I just enjoy my work. I enjoy using play therapy. I believe in play therapy. I love being a trauma therapist. And people often ask me about trauma and how can I say I love trauma, because I know that I did absolutely nothing to traumatize this client that's coming in my door, right? But I am a part of that change process for
Yeah.
them. I see how they come in, I see how they leave. And that's what I love about it. When we make that connection and they start opening up, although they're afraid, right, of the hurt and the pain that's associated with it, right? They trust me to be
Yeah.
on this journey with them. And we don't have to, they don't have to tell me what happened to them.
Right.
And I want people to stop saying, like, your trauma story. No, that's their trauma experience. It's not a story, it's their
Mm,
experience.
that's a really important reframe.
Yeah, it's their
Yeah.
experience. It's not a story. And I don't need to hear that experience unless you want me to hear it. I deal with thoughts, feelings, and behaviors associated or connected to that trauma experience. So I just need to know something happened. I don't need to hear the details to help you. And that could be harmful for clients too if
Right.
you are pushing them. And I tell clients to run. If you go to a therapist
Hmm.
and in that first session, they start asking you the details of your trauma experience, Yeah, nah, run. Just get up and walk out. Get up and walk out.
Yeah.
Because that's about them.
Right.
And when I do supervision and consultation, I ask them, why do you need to know that?
Right.
Why do you need to know that?
Right.
Now, if the client want to tell, but I even stop clients from telling me their story because they're not properly resourced. They don't have that agency to deal with it. But they feel that because I'm in therapy, that's what I'm here for. I have to talk about it. We'll get to it.
Right. And as we know in NARM, like that can be, if we're just telling the story, that can just be part of the default rather than connecting to our agency and the capacity to heal. Yeah.
Yes. And then knowing when to use these different trauma modalities. Just like I know EMDR is very popular for people right now. And it's like the trauma training to have. And then you have therapists that's doing EMDR with every client. EMDR is not for every client that has trauma. Right. Just because you know a trauma modality and you've been trained in it doesn't mean it's for every client. And so you're causing harm and damage to that client because they don't need that yet.
But is play therapy for everybody?
Play therapy is absolutely for everybody.
I was going to say like that. I mean, I would venture a guess that all adults need to get more in touch with the parts of us that want to play.
Yes, because some kids, so play therapy is a modality that can be used in conjunction or integrated in any other types of modalities, right? And that's why it's important to know the theories behind it, the therapeutic powers of play. There are 20 therapeutic powers of play that spread across 4 categories. And connecting that so you can use that with different modalities. But you have to know what you're doing. And if you don't, that's harmful to clients. And we're not supposed to do harm. And with trauma, having them to push that out before they're ready, that's damaging. That's very damaging.
Yeah. Well, we're coming to the end of the hour. So, of course, I'm going to ask the biggest question of the entire interview. So I've kind of been like shifting the miracle question for the guest, and I kind of like what comes out of it. So if you could wave a magic wand and change the therapy field, change the field where we're all trained to be more competent with the trauma experienced by Black families, what would you like to see be different in our training programs?
One, having more Black therapists training. So, having more Black therapists on those panels to inform and knowing that it's okay to ask Black clients about their experiences. It's okay to ask Black clients about their culture. It's not okay for that client to educate you. There's a difference between asking questions to be informed and asking the client to educate you. So I would say more education and like real education and taking it on, not letting it be trendy because the country is in an uproar about what has happened. I think the pandemic put a spotlight on the experiences of Black people in this country. Everybody was on pause. And the news for ratings, they keep replaying over and over, which traumatizes people and therapists. Right. Cut that stuff off. I don't watch the news. I just don't. And so being real about and being serious about working with our community, our needs are different. No other race has endured pain and disparities like the Black race because of our skin. And therapists need to acknowledge that. And then is that Black pain allowed in your therapeutic sessions?
And anger and joy and all of it.
And all of that, I consider all of that pain, that anger, that joy, that anxiety. Sometimes, Black people can be expressive. They get, in an uproar and it's like, this is new. This is new for me, even stepping through the door. Right. And so we have to, I want therapists to know that it takes a lot for a Black person and I'm talking about in general, not every Black person, but in general, it takes a lot for a Black person to even make that phone call. So you have to make sure that you are welcoming them from the onset of that phone call, but definitely are they allowed to show up in their authentic self with all of that pain and that hurt that they have to process.
Right.
Are you going to allow that in, or are you going to put restrictions on it?
Right.
Of course you want safety, like, physical safety, but are you going to allow them to express what they need to express? And so for Black communities, that's what I want to see our field change to. One, more Black therapists. But again, representation matters, but don't let representation make you go to a therapist that's going to be harmful because they can't meet your needs.
And because white women are the dominant in the helping professions, we really have to do our work so that we can create a space where Black and brown clients can bring their full selves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Full self. And that's me, whether I step into training or into consultation or supervision, you're going to get me. These are my experiences. The way that I operate is colored by my lenses and my experiences, just like with anyone else. And if you are going to treat me or train me, because I still do training as a therapist, I have to, but I'm also knowledgeable. I love learning, but I need for you to be okay with me not being okay with your misrepresentations of my communities.
Right. Yeah. Well, before we end, I'd love for you to tell people where it is that they can find more about you and your work.
You can find me on Instagram, Twitter.
I'm going to follow you right now. What is it?
TikTok at Althea T. Simpson. So that's Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. I have Unicorn Life Play Therapy, which is a public page on Facebook. And then Black Play Therapy Society is a public page on Facebook. And if they want to find out more about Black Play Therapy and workshops, I do monthly workshops specific to the Black community. And I know that these issues cross races and nationalities, but again, the needs in the Black community are different. And that's why it's super focused on working with the Black communities. And so they can go to blackplaytherapy.com to find that.
Amazing. Well, I am just delighted to have shared space with you today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. I'm sure listeners will just have enjoyed this episode so thoroughly. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode. To find more about our guest, check the show notes or visit us at www.narmtraining.com/transformingtrauma. The NARM Training Institute also offers the Inner Circle, an online self-paced learning program intended for anyone who is interested in joining an international online community focused on healing complex trauma. You can find more information about these trauma-informed learning programs in addition to other resources on the website, www.narmtraining.com. Thanks to Andrea Klunder and the Creative Imposter Studios for producing and editing, to Tori Essex for our album art, and to Brad Kammer for the creation of this podcast. We look forward to building community and connection with you and changing the world by transforming trauma.